Are you a gig worker or self-employed? Womply has helped over 100,000 small businesses get a PPP stimulus loan and proudly serves more than 600,000 small businesses across America. Millions of self-employed workers may qualify for up to $41,000 in 100% forgivable loans. So apply today. The program ends soon and funds are limited. Apply now at womply.com/apply and see if you qualify for a PPP loan. Womply.com/apply. That's WOMPLY.com/apply.
Imagine an ER waiting room with your favorite blanket and pillow, your cat's pixel and widget, and your mom's chicken soup. At Dignity Health, we know the only thing worse than being in pain is being stuck in an ER waiting room. So we offer In Quicker. You get an estimated ER arrival time online so you can start your wait at home. It's just another way of putting leading-edge medicine within easy reach. Learn more at strosehospitals.org/ER. Dignity Health, including St. Rose Dominicans, Rose de Lima, San Martin, and Siena campuses in Henderson and Las Vegas. Hello, human kindness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the program. Today, we're going to stick with the discussion about academia, and we're going to turn our focus a bit to MIT. Now, yesterday, we read a fantastic opinion piece from the Harvard Crimson, which is the school newspaper. And today we have an article from the Tech, which is a newspaper from MIT. And in this article, we see the same outcry. We see the same demands. And I have to say, it's starting to pick up steam in the world of academia, it would seem. At the very least, on these campuses, the students that are going to the school right now, the students that are writing for these papers, they seem to be acutely aware of the situation that's unfolding, and they are demanding change. Now, it is a good thing, right? When you see people within these institutions begin to demand change. My question is, what has taken so long? Now, you've had a few people out there like Dr. Stephen DeLay, who has stood tall before the wagon and called out and criticized his colleagues about their behavior. But overall, and for the vast majority of folks in academia, mum's been the word. Nobody has come out both guns blazing. Nobody has called these people out for their behavior. And to be honest with you, if I was a professor, I'd be going crazy and I'd be livid about this, because in reality, this puts a stain on me too, even though I might be doing things the right way. So I'd be out with both guns blazing, going crazy, and demanding that people are held accountable. Pretty much in the same way that Dr. DeLay is doing. So let's jump into this article from thetech.com and let's see what they have to say about Seth Lloyd and MIT and their close relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Headline: Don't be surprised by the administration's decision on Seth Lloyd. Top MIT administrators who enabled Epstein's sex trafficking operation are still covering their tracks. Pretty damning opening, huh? And this article is penned by students, people who go to MIT or graduated from MIT, et cetera, et cetera. So this isn't people from the outside, trying to drop a hit piece on MIT. This isn't, some journalistic axe to grind against MIT. Unfortunately, these are just the facts of the situation. And unfortunately, MIT is up to it all the way to their ears, the same as Harvard. This article was authored by Alonso Espinosa Dominguez, Matt Hodel, Rebecca Lazard, and Gabe Fields. This past December, Professor Seth Lloyd, who raked in hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations from child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, was reinstated to his post as an MIT professor with a few minor penalties following a drawn-out investigation Oh, well, of course he was reinstated, right? Because he had no idea. Look, it behooves MIT to make sure that Seth Lloyd saves face, right? Because if not, then MIT looks bad because he's an employee of theirs. He's employed at the school, is a big part of what's going on over there. So once again, we see the parasitic relationship that exists. A guy like Seth Lloyd could never do what he did as far as being involved with Epstein without institutionalized cover provided from the trustees and the board. Point blank, period. And everything else they say and every way they try to divert the blame just digs their hole deeper. They need to come out, be honest about what occurred, and if you were a trustee or a board member at the time that Jeffrey Epstein was making these donations, do the right thing and step down. Lloyd, a professor of physics and mechanical engineering, had a close personal and professional relationship with Epstein. He traveled to Epstein's private island, where it is believed that children were trafficked as recently as 2019, visited him in prison after his felony conviction for child prostitution, attended meetings with him on campus, and received 225,000 racks in funding from Epstein between 2012 and 2017. All right, stop, hit the brakes. Seth Lloyd, who visited Jeffrey Epstein after his felony conviction, who visited the island, who attended meetings with him on campus, and who also received the paltry amount of $225,000, was just reinstated to his job at MIT in December? What? So for the group of supposedly smartest people in the world, you idiots are actually pretty dumb. Although Lloyd claims not to have known about the extent of Epstein's crimes, this is hard to believe, considering the number of news articles and public lawsuits which were filed during their association. And this is the crux of it all, right? This is where the rubber meets the road. All of these people who act like they had no idea, they're BSing you, okay? There was an ample amount of evidence available to the public. There were plenty of stories available to the public. And Seth Lloyd and all of these other enablers, well, they would have you believe they're the smartest people in the room every single time they walk in. Just listen to them. They'll tell you that. But now, all of a sudden, their perception is off. They can't see the forest through the trees. They don't know how to work a simple Google search. They want you to believe that they can figure out the secrets of how the universe was created, but they had no idea what Jeffrey Epstein was, what sort of monster was in their midst. Yeah, sorry, not buying it, Seth Lloyd. Academics who were in Epstein's circle have said that Epstein was very open about the fact that he had two interests, science and P-word, and often had young women hovering around and giving him massages. Oh, well, we all know what massages turned into at Epstein's, right? When I say massages with Epstein, I mean air quotes, because we know that massage meant sex. One anonymous professor recalled that at a scientific conference held by Epstein, sometimes he'd turn to his left and ask some science-y questions. Then he turned to his right and asked the model to show him her portfolio. What? So he'd be there asking questions about science, right? And then 2 seconds later, he'd turn over to whichever poor young lady was caught up in his web at the time and ask about her modeling portfolio. And these scientists didn't find that weird. They didn't, elbow each other and say, what the hell is wrong with this sick prick? Of course not, because they were benefiting. They knew what was going on, right? They'll say they didn't, but it's a lie to me, okay? It's a joke. How don't you know? This guy has all these hot young girls around him all the time. What do you think, he's Casanova? You have to show up at a science conference with some hot lady with a modeling portfolio with her on your arm to a science conference. What are you trying to prove, Jeffrey Epstein? Or is he trying to show off, Hey, look, I have all of these beautiful women around me, and if you play ball with me, come to my island and, hang out and do what I want you to do, you could have all of this too. Lloyd himself confirmed when speaking to student protesters in 2019 that Epstein often traveled with young women, describing it as creepy. All of these academics insisted they could tell the women were over 18, but we can assume some were not. And of course, how are you going to tell they're over 18? Give me a break. I worked in an industry, where basically my job was to look at people's IDs. I managed a sports book inside of a casino, and, I consider myself pretty good at spotting a real ID from a fake ID. Certainly not a professional, right? But even somebody like me who's looking at IDs all the time, I would have a hard time telling how old people were without looking at those IDs. How many 16-year-old girls look like they're 25 or 26 these days? I'm sure a lot. And back then, when Epstein had these girls around him, he would get them all dolled up the way he wanted them to look, right? They had fashionistas, they had hairstylists, they had all kinds of people available to them to make sure they were looking the part that Jeffrey Epstein wanted them to play. So for these scientists to act like, oh yeah, well, I knew for a fact she was over 18, it's such BS. And they're such liars. And they really think they're going to get away with this, or that they got away with this. Well, they haven't. The two portions of this case that we've really been focused on here, laser-like, recently, is the financial aspect and this whole situation in academia. Because these are two very unreported, or underreported, I should say, aspects of this case. Lloyd described his receipt of donations as an act of rehabilitation following Epstein's prison term. He elaborated, "It wasn't money that I needed. I took it because I thought that it was my obligation to do so, because I had said I was going to help him with coming back into society." Oh, well, you're such a great guy, Mr. Lloyd. You should just be automatically given sainthood because you're the patron saint of pedophiles, obviously, huh? Hell of a title that you earned there for yourself, Mr. Lloyd. You sick bastard. What do you mean, to help him rehabilitate? There's no rehabilitation for this. There's chemical castration and buried under a prison. That's about as far as it goes as when it comes to rehabilitation for these sorts of sex criminals. The true meaning of this statement is that Lloyd directly aided Jeffrey Epstein by taking his money. Epstein was able to evade prosecution for decades precisely because of the web of powerful figures that he developed using philanthropic donations in combination with blackmail, intimidation, and access to his trafficked girls. Well, what do you know? Sounds like they might have been listening to the podcast before this article, because we've been laying this out for how long now? Since October? This is the blueprint. This is the template. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a criminal conspiracy that was being engaged in by dozens of people on many different levels. And Seth Lloyd certainly was engaging in it. Now, he got all this money from Epstein, right? Where did that money originate? I don't know how many times we have to have this conversation, but if that money was gotten from ill-gotten gains, then Seth Lloyd should be part of any RICO investigation that moves forward with criminal liability, by the way. While some in his social and professional networks, like MIT's AI guru Marvin Minsky, allegedly participated directly in the trafficking ring, others like Lloyd enabled Epstein by growing his network, granting legitimacy to conferences held at Epstein's private island, and building his credentials as a science philanthropist. All factual. This is a good article and a good accounting of what went on so far by the tech. And some of these legacy media outlets should probably follow suit and get a hint on how to properly cover this story. Because a guy like Seth Lloyd and his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that he's back on MIT's campus, yeah, I think that's a worthy news story that should probably be reported. He cynically cloaks this in the language of restorative justice in order to conceal the fact that he enabled a child sex trafficking operation and benefited from it through a funded sabbatical and access to Epstein's web of prominent publishers. Yo, this is damning, folks, for Seth Lloyd, and this is damning for MIT, and this is damning for all of academia who has not stood up and said enough is enough. How could you possibly be a professor at MIT, a PhD at MIT, a graduate assistant at MIT, a student at MIT, and not be fired up about something like this? This isn't scuttlebutt. This isn't he said, she said. This is all factual, folks, and that's what's so disgusting about it. In light of these facts, Lloyd's punishments, professional conduct training, temporary unspecified restrictions on compensation, and temporarily not being able to advise first-year students are clearly not proportional to his wrongdoings. The basic response should be to remove him from his position along with all others at the Institute who did the same. Point blank, period. I 100% support that statement. There is no middle ground here. I'm sorry, but you played the game. You took the money from Jeffrey Epstein. You're the one that palled around with Jeffrey Epstein. You're the one who enabled Jeffrey Epstein. So now you have to pay the price. And I don't mean a little slap on the wrist, okay? Because that's what Seth Lloyd got here, folks. A little slap on the wrist. And you know, it sucks, right? In one regard, I don't take joy in seeing these people be destroyed, right? Their careers, it sucks, but they made these decisions. They're the ones who made these decisions. Now they have to abide by the consequences. The sad part is MIT has no teeth. MIT is all about the money. MIT does not care about the survivors. MIT might respond to this piece by saying that they can't revoke Lloyd's tenure because he didn't engage in a sufficiently serious policy violation. But in fact, the criteria for terminating tenure are quite vague and could easily apply to this situation. From time to time, it may be necessary to take action with respect to a faculty member who engages in conduct incompatible with the responsibilities of faculty membership or who fails to meet reasonable standards of performance. The circumstances that can lead to such action cannot be anticipated in precise terms. So basically, MIT could make the move here and try and get rid of him, even though he's a tenured professor. They do not have the backbone for it. The investigation conducted by MIT into Lloyd's actions conveniently skipped over the questions of what role people like him, and the university more broadly, played in enabling Epstein's crimes. This is a great piece. I know I just said that, but man, they're really getting to the meat and potatoes in this piece here. The enabling of Jeffrey Epstein, while it's not the actual abuse and trafficking of these girls, physically, is a really horrific situation unto itself. And the people that engaged in it, there has to be consequences. The panelists appointed to manage the investigation and decide on disciplinary action included many of Lloyd's colleagues and fellow department members and didn't consult any students or community members in the process. Of course not, because it's all a shtick, right? It's all a game. The good old boys club, it's everywhere. Good old boys and girls club, I should say. If you're in, you're in. If you're not, you're not. So, of course, they're going to rally around their boy, Seth Lloyd. According to them, fellow travelers, well, he didn't do anything wrong. He just took some money. They found no problem with the donations Lloyd received from Epstein, with his visiting Epstein in prison, or more broadly with the fact that he entered into a relationship of patronage with a child sex trafficker, because apparently none of these things violate any MIT policies. Yeah, so going to the jail to have a top ramen with your boy Jeffrey Epstein, it's okay. Doesn't matter. You can come back and teach 18-year-old kids while you're hanging out with this pedophile in your spare time. How is that okay? How is there no levers in place to yank on and stop action like that? I mean, holy Toledo, we're not just talking about somebody who was taking a couple of bucks from Epstein, okay? We're not just talking about somebody who might have been on the hook for a few favors. Personal relationships, close enough that he visited Epstein in jail. I don't know about you folks, but you have to be pretty close to me if I'm going to make the effort to come visit you in jail. Instead, they looked for the most minor infraction they could punish him for, concluding that when Lloyd received his first donation from Epstein in 2012, he violated the Institute's vague conflict of interest policy by not explicitly informing MIT that Epstein was a convicted sex offender. What? Shouldn't MIT know that as well? Shouldn't there be someone that's in the office when these donations that come in? Shouldn't this person vet these donations to see where they come from? They don't care, though. They'll take the money from anyone. It's absurd and perfectly in line with MIT's approach to the Epstein scandal, that this sin of omission is chosen as Lloyd's token rule violation. And that's what they did, right? They looked for the most weak thing they could get him on, the littlest thing they could get him on. And that's what they used to try and help him save face and help the university save face. So now the university doing this, they're basically enabling Jeffrey Epstein all over again. So MIT, what in the hell is the problem over there? When the 2020 report on the Epstein scandal by law firm Goodwin Procter was released, it claimed that Lloyd had purposely concealed Epstein's identity, pages 19 and 20 of the report. This recent review panel decided even that claim couldn't be supported. So instead, the issue now is that Lloyd didn't explicitly communicate Epstein's sex offender status when he received that first donation in 2012. What? Absolutely ridiculous, okay? And MIT should be ashamed of themselves, and they should be called out for this shit. This is garbage. This information could be found upon a basic Google search. And sure enough, only a few months later in November of that year, MIT's Office of Resource Development discovered Epstein's sex offender status and immediately proceeded to approve a second donation from Epstein to Lloyd. Page 21 of the Goodwin Procter report. Clearly, the Institute never had an issue with Epstein's identity. No, they didn't. And I know it's sad to think like that and sad to think about, but places like MIT, places like Harvard, places like Arizona State University, and the rest of them, they do not care, okay? They don't care one bit. And for them to get up there on their ivory tower and for all of these professors to come out on all of these TV shows from these schools and act like they give a damn, well, remember what we talk about here before you go cheering on any of these people who advance your political football. Because at the end of the day, folks, they were all involved, okay? All of these people. We're talking 4 different presidents this has spanned through. So where's the action? Republican and Democrat. Miss me with the tribal bullshit, because guess what? All of these sick bastards were involved. The real reason that Lloyd will face no serious consequences for enabling a child sex trafficker is because the university's relationship with Epstein was facilitated and approved by members of the top levels of the administration. How long have I been telling you folks that? I mean, come on. You know what? It's not too hard to read between the lines here and see what these people are yapping on about. And once you get a little bit of a taste of the misdirection that they use in their statements and how they use their statements and what they say, it's quite obvious to pick it apart and see what they're really up to. And we know that the trustees and the board members all knew what Epstein was. They all knew that Seth Lloyd was in bed with a serpent, and they didn't give one damn. They thought they'd get away with it. They thought Epstein had already beat the case. They thought Epstein was never going to come back to haunt them. Well, they thought wrong. If they decided to punish Lloyd for the donations he received, they would also be forced to admit the guilt of top officials like President L. Raphael Reif, MIT Corporation Chairman Robert Millard, and Vice President for Resource Development Julie Lucas. All of those people should be canned. Every one of them should lose their job. If they were the ones that were facilitating these Epstein money movements, if they were in charge when it happened, you all know how I feel about that. If you're the boss, the buck stops with you. Something goes shitty with this podcast, there's no one to blame but myself. I'm in charge. So when you have a position where you're the boss, well, that comes with great responsibility as well as great rewards. The Goodwin-Procter report, released last January, when read closely, details the high-level involvement of top university officials in the relationship with Epstein. And I talked about that after this report. It's obvious that all of these people at the very top were at the very least hip to what was going on. In 2013, MIT Vice Presidents Morgan, Newton, and Ruiz formulated an explicit plan to facilitate donations from Epstein and marked them as anonymous. This framework seems to have remained in place until Epstein's arrest in 2019. This policy was reviewed and reaffirmed multiple times over the next several years, including by Julie Lucas, under whom the policy remained in place. Pages 33 through 35 of the Goodwin-Procter report. Again, this is systemic, folks. That's the point I'm trying to make here, okay? It's not just one professor or two professors. It's systemic. The rot is from the top. And all of these people that let it occur, all of these people who had this happen on their watch, need to face the music. Although the paper record of President Reif's involvement was kept purposely sparse through a strategy of bringing up the Epstein donations as off-agenda items in meetings, it's quite clear that Reif was involved in conversations about the plan to accept Epstein's money. At an April 2015 senior team meeting, which was around the time the policy was being reevaluated, Reif wrote Epstein, Joy Ito on his copy of the agenda, pages 36 and 38 of the Goodwin-Procter report. So he wrote this on his agenda sheet. And then he says he has no idea why, and he had no idea what was going on. It's such bullshit. It is such garbage. And I'm glad that this article's out so we can go back over it one more time and drop another nuke right in the midst of these academics. He claims to not remember why. On top of this, Chairman Millard was approached multiple times by Joy Ito in 2016 and 17 for assistance in cultivating Epstein, who they both knew personally as a donor, pages 40 through 43 of the Goodwin-Procter report. So, Chairman Millard was approached multiple times by Joy Ito, okay, to help facilitate the relationship with Epstein and to help bridge the gap. Millard is still on the board. Millard still involved. When are these people ever going to pay the price? Again, Joy Ito, well, he got axed, right? Got a little smack in the wrist, got axed, but it's never the people in the positions of leadership, right? These guys got to go. These men and women who are in charge of this stuff, all of them have to go. Not just the scientists who took the money, not just the professors who took the money, but the people who helped facilitate it. He apparently did not find this concerning enough to raise a flag with the Resource Development Office or other top administrators. The clear conspiracy on all levels of the Institute to knowingly accept money from a child sex trafficker has been justified and downplayed in a variety of ways. The Goodwin-Procter report concluded that mistakes of judgment were made, but that the administrators' actions were acceptable because they didn't violate any law, breach any MIT policy, or act in pursuit of personal gain. Now, how many of these reports have we heard now? And isn't this the ongoing sentiment in these reports? Oh, it was just an error of judgment. No wrongdoing was really done. It was just a mistake. They just made a mistake. Sorry. This is more than a mistake, all right? This makes you complicit of enabling one of the biggest child sex traffickers in modern history, perhaps ever. And that's a title that MIT is going to hold for quite some time Because guess what? They haven't done anything to fix it. They haven't done anything to address this. In fact, what they continue to do is to try and hide their involvement. When discussing the involvement of senior administrators like President Rife, the report minimizes their complicity by emphasizing that no provocative terms like sex offender or pedophile were ever used in their presence while describing Epstein. This language serves to sidestep the obvious fact that people running an organization are responsible for the things happening immediately around them. Holy Toledo, it's almost like I wrote this article. Is this real life? Somebody's talking about personal responsibility? Wow. Guess what? When you're the boss and you're making the big dough and you got the corner office, you got yourself an assistant who gets you your coffee, well, when shit goes south, you're the one who has to stand up and take the blame. That's why if you're a good boss, you make sure you have good people, because you're only as good as your people. And if your people are engaging in this sort of behavior, you get rid of them. If not, that makes you a spineless scumbag who is enabling them. In the MIT Corporation Executive Committee's final statement on the matter, they write, "The report makes clear there were multiple opportunities to stop the Epstein donations and halt efforts by Joy Ito and Seth Lloyd to cultivate him as a donor." What? All of you were cultivating him, okay? Not just Ito and not just Seth Lloyd. It is regrettable that no one with the knowledge, opportunity, and the authority to do so stepped up to end the Epstein funding. Wow, this is such a joke. This is a slap in the face, this report. All of this is a slap in the face to the survivors and to the case itself. MIT needs to really be called out onto the carpet here. MIT has to answer for this. As for what should have been taken into consideration that wasn't, the Goodwin-Procter report gives the following criteria, page 55. 1. Whether accepting money from Epstein was consistent with the MIT's core values. 2. The impact that MIT's acceptance of Epstein's money would have on the MIT community should those donations become known. And 3. Whether it was appropriate to accept donations with a requirement by MIT that they remain anonymous. Anonymous donations. That shouldn't occur. I'm sorry, but it shouldn't occur. There has to be an accounting here. We have to know where the money comes from. Basically, the problem was not that MIT enabled sex trafficking, but that people found out about it. Bingo! 100%. And that's all these institutions, not just MIT. All of these places. It's not that Jeffrey Epstein was sex trafficking young girls. It's the fact that they got caught. Same with the financial institutions. So please, save the crocodile tears. Save us the nonsense that you actually care all of a sudden, okay? Because you don't. Your track record states otherwise. And it's true. The resulting public outrage, bad press, the student protests seriously damaged the university's standing. Many people inside and outside the university were enraged by this blatant relationship with a child sex trafficker. And the event stirred up anger around other issues such as institutional sexism, harassment by faculty, and fraudulent research. Due to this, the university wound up facing a significant dilemma in its response to the Epstein scandal. Boo friggin' who, it should. It's a long time coming and a reckoning for these Ivy League schools. Enough is enough with these schools dictating everything for everybody. Enough with all of our leaders coming from these few schools. I'm tired of it. On one hand, the university needed to respond in a way that made it seem like they cared about these issues, while on the other hand, it was important not to respond too strongly because the entire top level of the administration was implicated, and because at the end of the day, MIT's existence depends on the kinds of cozy and flexible relationships with donors that caused this scandal in the first place. They needed to feign outrage and act as if they wanted to reform the institute, while also creating as little space as possible for assessments of guilt or interrogation of MIT's other funding sources. This is the best explanation that I have heard so far from anyone writing about this. This is very well done by the folks over here at thetech.com, folks. And I highly encourage you all to read this article as well as listen to it because it's very important, okay? MIT understood the sort of monster they were in bed with. And that's how the game was played for so long. They didn't care. But now that there's public outrage and an outcry, well, things are changing. So don't let anybody tell you that your voices don't mean anything. Don't let anybody tell you that everybody working together for justice means nothing. Like I always say, one gnat, well, they can avoid that. 10 million gnats, now you're suffocating. To these ends, Lloyd and former Media Lab director Joy Ito served as convenient scapegoats for the administration. Although almost all of their actions were taken with the full knowledge and approval of top university officials, it became possible early on to frame the Epstein scandal as the moral failing of a few individuals, rather than a side effect of how MIT is designed to operate. Yo, this is... I don't mean to keep saying it, but man, this is perfectly done. It's the truth. This is an institutional problem. Joy Ito and Seth Lloyd are symptoms of that problem, but they are not the cause of this disease. Ito's very public resignation made it possible to pin blame on him, while also removing the need for the university to take action. The situation with Lloyd was different, because although there was significant backlash against him, he had no intention of stepping down, and the administration was forced to decide on a response. They had to settle for a middle-of-the-road approach, with temporary suspension and drawn-out investigation that ultimately found no real issues, except a manufactured one. It's been a while since this scandal first broke out, and the numerous global crises of the last year have allowed those involved to skirt by mostly unscathed. Not here on this podcast. Every day, at least one new episode since October 1st. We should not forget that the MIT administration, with the knowledge of President Reif and Chairman Millard, consciously chose to develop a relationship of patronage with a child sex trafficker. And they are directly complicit in enabling his crimes. Yes, they are. They definitely are. President Reif and Chairman Millard should both step down. They should both be forced out. And hopefully after this article and the outcry that's coming, that will be the case. There is no question that the people involved from Lloyd to the very top should have been immediately removed from their post when this came to light. And they still should be. However, we can't just let ourselves see the Epstein scandal as the wrongdoings of individual immoral actors, or as a failure of the university to uphold its values. If we want to truly understand why MIT's regular functioning results in these horrific events, we will need to start asking deeper questions about the political and economic interests that drive the university, as well as questions about the nature and history of gendered violence and how it's perpetuated by our institutions. So, the full court press is on, folks. Harvard getting called to task. MIT getting called to task. And on top of that, you have people like Dr. Stephen DeLay coming out and lending their voice to everyone else who is crying out for justice within the world of academia. Folks, I have a funny feeling that the train has already left the station, and there is no stopping the justice that it's about to deliver. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci at protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. To everybody who has donated to the PayPal recently and in the past, thank you folks very much. All right, everybody, I will be back later on tonight, and we will pick up where we left off. Have a great Thursday, everybody.
Imagine an ER waiting room with your favorite blanket and pillow, your cat's Pixel and Widget, and your mom's chicken soup. At Dignity Health, we know the only thing worse than being in pain is being stuck in an ER waiting room. So we offer In Quicker. You get an estimated ER arrival time online so you can start your wait at home. It's just another way of putting leading-edge medicine within easy reach. Learn more at strosehospitals.org/ER. Dignity Health, including St. Rose Dominicans, Rose de Lima, San Martin, and Siena campuses in Henderson and Las Vegas. Hello, human kindness.